Zheng's transformation and entry. Zheng's entry and return was instantaneous. A second before, Zheng had been waving his hand in farewell, looking leisurely. A moment later, another Zheng, this one flustered and panting, appeared. He seemed to be shouting something, and was mounted on a nightmare. His hand was wielding Tiger's soul as well. Although his body was covered in wounds and his clothes were in tatters, he looked lively. Ha ha ha, you deserve it, you idiot. I already calculated out the time to use chaos. You thought you could kill me? You wanted to scheme against me, damn it, it's not like you're Chu Xian. How could you do it so easily? What a joke, I can easily see through such a childish plot. Ha ha ha, I've been schemed against by Xian so many times. How could this child's play faze me in the slightest? Weren't you still killed by me in the end? Ha ha ha. Zheng ignored all the dumbfounded expressions of those around him. He was letting out all his delight. He only laughed towards the others after a long time. I'm back. I thought I could rest quietly in the Lord of the Rings. Who knew the battles inside would be more fierce than Starship Troopers? Ha ha ha, that's fine. There was an increase anyways. I can go wild on a killing spree in the final battle now. Everyone was still slightly stupefied. Disregarding all else, Zheng's current state was strange to them. Before he had entered Lord of the Rings, his mood hadn't been good. Instead, due to the need to persistently looking for his insight, his mood was better described as slightly down. Who knew that after entering Lord of the Rings, his mood was excited, like he wanted to go to the final battle for a rampage? Did you attract hundreds of elf beauties inside? Then you went a few hundred rounds, and you feel incredibly heroic upon your return? Cheng Xiao smiled filthily. Beauties more like hundreds of monsters. Everyone then realized something strange regarding Zheng's body. He hadn't entered his dragon transformation, and was sitting on the nightmare like a normal person. Even that oppressive pressure around him before was lost as well. There was only mildness and tranquility left, his aura like a normal person's. You said you just used Chaos, Genesis Splitter? Xian suddenly asked. Zheng laughed, nodding at the same time. He didn't look like he had just used it, as he lacked the extreme fatigue and injuries from the past. Don't look at how relaxed I look here. Actually, I'm so tired that I'm about to collapse. Let me repair my body first. Ha ha ha. I'll tell you my experiences in Lord of the Rings in a while. As his words fell, Zheng had already shouted for a full body repair from God. As Zheng said himself, the body repair this time was long, lasting only slightly than the times he was on the brink of death. This is the new skill I learned in Lord of the Rings, death-defying art, from the Wildman, the Dunlendings. I found the effect aren't too bad after testing it out. I won't immediately my combat ability after using Chaos, Genesis Splitter at least. There's another bit of hope now for the final battle. Zheng smiled to the rest, before beginning to detail out what happened in Lord of the Rings. Nothing much had happened at first. He had exchanged a lot of time, totaling over 20,000 points worth of days. So, he had just traveled through the elf and human territories and met up with some friends he had fought alongside in the past. This period had still been a leisurely time, as he continuously searched for a chance at enlightenment. Still, good times don't last long. A new situation had arisen a month later. Black armored cavalry began appearing in the human territories from some unknown place. Their goal was a simple one. To seek out and capture Zheng. Those cavalrymen were ridiculously strong. They were the equal of 8 ring wraiths, and there were over 80 of them. You simply don't know how horrifying that pressure of theirs was. They routed the human cavalry troops like they were playing around. I just happened to be in the snow mountains at that time. When I got back, Rohan was nigh destroyed. Zheng said sighingly, his mind recalling the scene of the battle then. Even if he was injured all over and finally using destruction before being able to kill off over half of their number, dozens had still fled away in various directions. That battle had had the dead and wounded all over, with Rohan suffering grave losses. That was just the beginning. The elf territories were attacked as well after. Although a majority of elves made their way to Valinor, the group that stayed on the continent that's led by the elf queen still remained strong. There were several archers even capable of the 3-arrow explosive shot. Even still, their country was very nearly breached, with the attack this time being from magically transformed orcs. Zheng gestured with his hands, still recall? Gandalf the White died and revived. He said Eru had revived him and was assisting us. He was the one who attacked me. Those gods, no demons. They're the same type of organism anyways. Lord of the Rings has living things like gods, valor. Although they're just higher tier organisms that are stronger, they indeed exist. They discovered something that they're living things in a box. Hilarious, isn't it? They discovered our god, and intended to enter God's dimension. Their method was simple, which was to capture and control me. There are two groups of these organisms. One which is named positively as gods, valor, while one named negatively as demons, Bomair. The ones that attacked us this time were the armies of the demons. In fact, the armies of the gods were starting to stir as well. They didn't know how long I'll stay there. They surrounded the elf and human territories so as to prevent me from escaping, and because my power shocked them in that initial battle. They wanted to force me out. How naive. They don't even count as the level of little kids when you compare them to Xian, ha ha ha. Zheng roared with laughter. He have so much pent up unspoken grievances from Xian, that when he sees these slightly poorer schemes, he disdains them. Everyone around was sweating as they listened, while Zheng continued to speak on. What happens next is interesting. The outstanding figures among humans and elves seek me out and told me their plan. They've long since disliked the gods and demons' manipulations from the shadows. Especially the early events in Lord of the Rings that greatly weakened the humans, elves, and dwarves, actually had the meddling of the gods and demons involved. So, they decided to borrow my strength to counterattack, as well as contact other races to participate in the war. We can't not mention the god and demons dimension at this point. Zheng said seriously. Gods and demons live within another dimension in that world. The world can be described as a folded paper. The god and demons dimensions are above and below the main dimension respectively, just slightly smaller. The entrance to the gods dimension lies in the sea while the demons dimension's entrance is underground. This is information the outstanding personages of that world found in ancient records. Gods and demons can use certain means to open the entrance temporarily and appear on the human world's continent. However, they have to wait for the time for it to close to come by itself. They can't close it otherwise. That was the intention of those outstanding personages. They'll dispose the gods and demons when they reveal themselves. Xian asked with interest, "Oh. What exactly did you do?" "We planned to attack the demon's nest first. After all, they revealed themselves first. But with the human, elf and dwarf armies then, they were too lacking in either numbers or quality. There were too many demons in the demons' lands, as well as wraiths and magically transformed orcs. It was hard to deal with them, so for 2 months, Aragorn and I went to search for forces to join the human alliance, such as the already disappeared Cyclops race, giant eagles willing to help, wildmen and so on. At this time, a large elf troop returned from across the seas, all elites. Although there were merely 1,000, they could all use 2-arrow explosive shots and had battle chi protection. Their strength was uncommon. My death-defying art was taught to me by the wildmen. Their berserker ability is more or less like my explosion. They invented it so that they wouldn't immediately collapse in battle and can rush back to their clans to receive treatment. It can consume life force from a long time after in advance, suppressing injuries. These 500 wildmen completely died out, but not before slaying a demons and monsters 100 times their number. They were true men. We then launched a surprise raid on the Devil Nest's entrance near Mount Demise. It really was a good slaughter. Only a few others and I barged in, lightly equipped. We killed 7 demons in the end in Devil Race's palace. Zheng made it sound easy, but anyone would know that it would have been anything but. That battle must have been brutal without compare. Even a narrow escape would have been a good result, and they even had to kill 7 demons in one shot. Disregarding everything else, the black armored cavalrymen before had already been so difficult to deal with. These 7 demons must have been. Correct. I used Chaos, Genesis Splitter then. Otherwise, we would all have died. I managed to get to the elf country before dying by relying on the death-defying art. Many elf wizards treated me, and also soaked me in some mysterious liquid. It still took me half a year before I regained my combat effectiveness. By that time, the gods' armies had already captured the elf country and Gondor. I myself had been on the run for over 3 months. The humans, elves, dwarves and other races' forces had all had a heavy toll exacted on them. They could only gather in Rohan like candles about to flicker out. Zheng was sighing at this point. He said with helplessness, "I'm not omnipotent. Even though I was at the threshold of the late 4th stage after returning from that near death, I hadn't truly entered that stage. I couldn't use Chaos, Genesis Splitter an unlimited amount. The gods' armies had numerous white wizards. If I rashly rushed in, I wouldn't be able to survive even if I used Chaos, Genesis Splitter and killed a few gods. After all, I don't know how many of the elf magicians who treated me were dead. I probably wouldn't have been able to find so many elf magicians again. Fortunately, there was half a month left from the time I returned to God's dimension. So, I brought along the remaining troops in the direction of my entry point to Lord of the Rings. Those gods really were idiots. They actually let us go in that direction. They only mustered troops to set up a net in front of us. I think they wanted to surround us and kill us. What idiots. What happened later is simple. We broke through the encirclement, and battled again, then dragged on till the time for me to return. I activated Chaos, Genesis Splitter. Apart from one god who fled, the rest were all slaughtered by me. Especially that strongest god. He was beaten up by me until his brains became a bloody paste. Ha ha ha. Zheng laughed heartily, but there was much grief intermixed in that laugh. After all, the people inside were all comrades who had fought alongside him. In those previous battles, they had all practically died out, especially in the attack on demonkind and the battle to kill the gods. What kinds of organisms are gods and demons? Xian suddenly asked. Gods and demons. They look externally like humans, just that their body contains energy. From certain characteristics, they're more like humans or humanoid organisms who possess great battle chi. Zheng said after thinking about it. Oh. Xian then turned back to his room. Everyone's heart jumped, with Zheng having the fastest reaction as he pulled Xian over. You must have noticed something? The Lord of the Rings world was constructed by God and is completely different from the Lord of the Rings in the real world. God definitely has a motive for designing it so. I don't get it, but you must have thought of some possibility. Spit it out, I want to know. Nothing much. Xian didn't say more, only indifferently turning his head away. You're untrustworthy. You must have some conspiracy. Zheng held him in a firm grip, not letting him go as his mouth questioned non-stop. Honglu, who hadn't said anything up till now, suddenly spoke up. Could this be an additional hypothesis of the saints and cultivators when they created God's realm? Additional hypothesis? Everyone asked curiously. Yes. This additional hypothesis means something like having a certain hypothesis towards something, but you don't dare to be sure of it. So you have to do some tests, but this test takes too long or is too costly, and the initial principle may not be earned back, and you may not be able to wait for the results to come out. So, you can only add some tests onto the main objectives to check out this hypothesis, such as in Lord of the Rings. Honglu stroked the hair in front of his head. He continued, based on what we know, the ancient saints and cultivators' power reached a certain level. Then, they discovered step by step that our world is under control. However, no such thing like how we appeared in Lord of the Rings happened. No one informed them, nor did any organisms from outside the box enter. The box was discovered by they themselves. So, they wanted to test out whether an organism could determine their box was a world when they reached a certain level of strength. It was this kind of thinking. So what if it's not? Does it matter? Zheng asked curiously. Yes. It's important. Xian suddenly said. If the organisms in a box can determine the world is a box as long as their power reaches a certain level, be it in technology, personal prowess, or causality type weapons, this means the saints and cultivators have a hope of breaking open this box or resisting the box creators. That's because this signifies the box isn't an absolute existence, and they don't absolutely have no choice but to stay inside. But what if the situation is opposite? If the organisms within can't discover this, no matter how powerful they become or how long they live, saints and cultivators can only despairingly accept one fact. It's that they can never ever resist those outside the box, and all their efforts are for naught. Why? Everyone asked uncomprehendingly. That's because if even the box's existence was something those outside the box told them, and even their resistance against the box creators was induced for some unknown reasons, as well as created God's dimension and the later events, were all part of someone's plan, do you think there's a chance of victory? Zheng's third stage was currently active, and he slightly understood the two's thoughts. If they themselves knew about the box, but the organisms, within the box the saints and cultivators created, that were similarly strong, didn't know about the box, this meant that the saints and cultivators knowing about the box was a result of the box creators letting them know. If so, wasn't everything someone else's plan? Isn't this thinking too cruel? Zheng lay on his bed, recalling the last things Xian and Honglu had said upon his return. This was a despair-inducing thinking. One's life, struggles, life and death battles, love, friendships, existence and even their feelings and tears, were these all planned out? Were they just the entertainment of those outside the box, just like movies, anime, games, or novels? Were his comrades and him just designed to make someone amused? If the final battle is for the qualifications to be the main character, and being the main character is itself the first qualification to challenge those outside the box, then I definitely have to obtain the qualifications to become the main character with my comrades. We must defeat Team Devil. No matter what. I will not lose. The next day. Enter the beam within 30 seconds. Target locked. Resident Evil Apocalypse. Teleportation begins. Ladies and gentlemen. Team Devil is waiting anxiously for us, here in Resident Evil Apocalypse. Let's kill them all. Let's go. Team China. So this is the site of the final battle. Team China had been transported to a desolate semi-desert. The ground hadn't completely turned to sand. However, it had already dried to the point where there wasn't the slightest bit of moisture left. All the soil in the surroundings was as such. There wasn't even the slightest greenery, nor obvious structures. It looked like it was the same scenery all around. As soon as they descended, Lan immediately spread out her Psyche Force scan, while transmitting the results of the scans to the others' minds. They hadn't had a Psyche Force scan for a long time, and the rookies were momentarily at a loss. Zheng, on the other hand, closed his eyes in nostalgia. Lan, good job. You'll be in great danger in the final battle. However, a large portion of our combat power needs to be sent out to fight, so Honglu and Lu Yu will protect you. Zheng nodded at Lan. Lan smiled sweetly. Good, let's let two children protect me. Speaking of which, it's not as if Psyche Force users have zero power. Hee, I at least have the power for self-defense. Zheng froze, before saying regretfully, too bad the nightmare I brought back was a counterfeit made by Gandalf. I hadn't even finished writing and it's already a pile of bones. I'll have brought it amount for you otherwise. When he finished speaking, he checked out his watch. Resident Evil Extinction, matters of importance. The final battle ends when all teams are eliminated, and one remains. The remaining team shall be the victor, able to either return to the real world or know the message left by the creators of God's dimension. Only one option can be chosen. At the same time, God's dimension and realm shall be destroyed, never to be activated again. If no one has achieved the goal of eliminating all other teams, those who survive 100 days, and kill off 10 from other teams will return to God's dimension to continue the cycle of movie worlds. If no one has achieved the goal of eliminating all other teams, those who enter the 7th underground laboratory alive, and stay within for 3 hours will return to God's dimension to continue the cycle of movie worlds. If none of the above 3 conditions are achieved within 100 days, you shall be wiped. Resident Evil Extinction shall have no negative point nor reward point rules. There shall be no ranked rewards either. Resident Evil Extinction restricts large-scale weapons, including both exchangeable weapons and non-exchangeable weapons. The list of restricted exchangeable weapons are as follows. Continental Oscillator. Atomic Annihilation Reaction Missile. Space Laser Cannon. The list of restricted non-exchangeable weapons are as follows. Magic Cannon. Revised Magic Cannon. The final battle, Resident Evil Extinction, begins in 3 minutes. Zheng slowly read through the text on the watch. For a time, all listened quietly to him. When these words were finished, everyone looked at Xian and Honglu. Before Xian could say anything, Honglu was already smiling a step ahead of him. It's quite similar to the restrictions I imagined. Still, what's the revised magic cannon? Oh. I recently had some new discoveries while researching the cultivation manuals. So, I made some alterations to the magic cannon. Xian nodded his head in admittance. Alright, so the revised magic cannon is ours. How about the magic cannon? Honglu asked. It can't possibly be the other Xian, right? Zheng, Heng, Chengxia, Wangxia, and the rest said in tandem. On a tall mountainside, Clone Xian sneezed. The surrounding people looked on in surprise, with a woman among them frantically walking over to his side. The smoke and dust here is a little much. Xian said this, before looking at his watch. The meaning of the words aren't too different from my conjectures before. Large-scale weapons to kill or injure are indeed restricted. This does fit the concept of the final battle, to force everyone to participate. There are 2 objectives for survival. The first is to kill off 10 from other teams. This stops team from hiding away at the start, and prevents the survival of weaklings. Even if it's our team that wants to survive, every person would have to kill 10. How many people do the other teams added together have? This is an obstacle the weak can't cross. This is for powerhouses that work alone, like Zhao Zuokang. A dashing man at the side smiled elegantly. He bowed, you flatter me too much. Xian ignored him, continuing, if we want a majority of the team to survive, there are only 2 options. First is obtain victory in the final battle and be that one and only team. Let's not discuss the probability of success for this now, and instead look at the other option. Reaching the 7th underground laboratory and staying there for 3 hours alive. If we decipher this, it means that the 7th underground laboratory is dangerous, verily so. It may be an unlimited amount of virus or Resident Evil monsters that have undergone an extreme evolution. We may be attacked by nukes. How to get to that unknown place is a problem, how to safely enter is another, as well as how to survive 3 hours inside. A riverside far away from Team Devil. A team of a dozen were stopping there. God's barrier hadn't been cancelled yet. Thus, Resident Evil Extinction hadn't truly started yet. All the teams were forced to be stuck inside to await the time to come. A blonde youth forcefully bit off a chunk of chocolate. He laughed coldly. Thus, in order to force all the teams to not hide and try hard to battle, God gave a first chance of survival that weaklings absolutely cannot complete and a second chance where weaklings can try their luck. In truth, it's a cruel method of weeding out the weak, who have absolutely zilch chance to survive. Then what do you think? Neos, what's your plan? There were 11 members around Neos. A black man among them asked curiously. Of course it's to ally with the strong. Neo sighed, before changing to a cold smile. He bit off a piece of chocolate, saying as he ate, our strength isn't enough to survive this final battle safely. Even if this final battle is only a final battle in meaning, that's only for the powerhouses of the 4th stage. This is the damnable final battle for us on the other hand. We have no alternative but to rely on the strong to battle. The Angel Alliance. Big brother Neos, I don't like that man Adam. He may smile warmly, but his eyes are filled with violence. I'm scared. A black little girl pulled at Neo's hand. Of course not. That man Adam is someone who beat me in the real world before. I know his habits well. He'll be unscrupulous in pursuit of his goals. He's the one least suited to consider as a partner. Our chances of death would be practically 100% cooperating with him. So we need another choice to rely on. One of the strongest 3 in God's realm, and it has to be one that we've tangled with before. Neos rose, gazing into the distance. He spoke slowly. Team China. We'll go seek out Team China, using Team Celestial's weakness as our qualification for an alliance. Resident Evil Extinction. The final battle. Let's go find Team Celestial. The final battle. It's here at last. Ah, my little apple. I'm coming. Let's go. Well, first join the Angel Alliance. Over time, a total of 12 of God's defensive barriers appeared in America. Each barrier held team members ranging from several to over 10 in number. Team Devil, Team China, and Team Celestial appeared in the West Coast, East Coast and near the southern border respectively. The rest of the teams were chaotically dispersed, at complete random. Yinkong, you fine? Zheng had been asking Xian regarding some of the rules for the final battle. When he saw Yinkong there trembling all over, he immediately asked. Yinkong turned her head over and smiled slightly, but a light shake of her head. She didn't utter a word, just sitting on the rock lovelily. She smiled. But it was a slight one and she didn't show that charming expression. Is it the main or secondary personality? Cheng Xiao saw her smile as well, before speaking right into Zheng's ears. Zheng shook his head doubtfully. No one knew what Yinkong had been doing in those 10 days in God's dimension, apart from her sporadic appearances. She didn't even go training in a movie world. In addition to that smile just now that was different from the past, Zheng immediately asked curiously, Yinkong, are you really fine? Tell me earlier if there's something wrong. The final battle is immediately after. I'm afraid you'll. Don't fear. Yinkong smiled gently. I won't drag the team down. Don't worry. My battle along with the others is coming, which is why I was trembling. Someone must have called me a little apple, I can more or less guess it. Hee, you should worry about your own battle. Her face had that gentle expression as before, her eyes lacking that coldness the main personality possessed in her eyes. How strange. It's neither the main nor secondary personality did the two merge. Zheng thought inwardly. Then without waiting for him to open his mouth, sand began to blow in the surroundings. The barrier around was completely gone. Resident Evil Extinction, the final battle henceforth began. First, we need to determine our location. We lack a definitive destination in America now, as well as the other team's locations. We don't know the 7th Underground Laboratory's location either. If we run about randomly in this world, 100 days will pass quickly. At that time, let's not even consider victory. We'll all be wiped. Xian said to the rest. Ever since entering Resident Evil Extinction, Xian hadn't looked at those documents again, instead wholeheartedly pondering various problems. It could be seen how much he cared about this final battle in meaning. This is the first problem we face: locations. The second problem, the need to conserve Zheng's power, is comparatively simpler. Zheng. You cannot fight with anybody above the 4th stage or any monsters of that level before you face your clone. You must do this. If my guess is right, your clone will do this too. No matter how high both of your powers are, you cannot easily defeat a 4th stage combatant within a short time. Leave the rest to us. Xian said seriously to Zheng. This was a rarely seen expression on him, apart from when he was doing important experiments. Of course, this was also basically the same expression he made when he did those experiments which would cause huge explosions. Zheng sighed, nodding his head silently. After a moment, he queried, what should we do next? Leave this desert. Find a city or somewhere with people alive. We also need to determine our position. We'll be returning to where the first Resident Evil took place. There's an important clue hidden there. Xian nodded. No one asked what this clue was. There wasn't even a trace of a clue, so they naturally had no idea what clue Resident Evil's laboratory held. This was their trust towards Xian. Or rather, it could be described as the experience of being toyed with multiple times and seeing others being toyed with as well. They were very, very complying with his words, which was why they all stood up and started walking in a direction of the desert. Speaking of which, I thought the final battle would restrict the revival cross. It actually didn't. If I had known, I'll have exchanged it. Hung grumbled as he walked. No. It's actually been restricted already. Hunglu said without even turning his head back. This is the final battle, so there are 3 points to confirm first. First, will a victorious team actually appear? If they do, the fate that awaits you would be destruction even if you return the revival cross to return to God's dimension after you die. Secondly, can you actually return to God's dimension? My answer is no, with at least an 80% of it being so. This is because of the third point, the rules God gave us. If no one has achieved the goal of eliminating all other teams, those who enter the 7th Underground Research Lab alive, and stay within for 3 hours will return to God's dimension to continue the cycle of movie worlds. This was what God said. What does this mean? It means that you'll meet the condition of not being wiped after 100 days, not that you can safely return to God's dimension after 3 hours. You'll still need to leave the laboratory and survive the 100 days. That's because its logical conclusion will be absurd. If a team is incredibly powerful, sufficient to destroy all other teams, what if others from other teams enter the 7th Underground Laboratory and return to God's dimension? The first method of victory condition wouldn't be achievable, because the powerful team wouldn't be able to complete the mission of killing all the teams. Based on God's, if no one has achieved the goal of eliminating all other teams, the priority should be the first method of victory. Hence, those who enter the laboratory and survive 3 hours will only have the qualifications of not being wiped after 100 days, not being directly sent to God's dimension. Hung was still slightly confused. Seeing that he wasn't alone in this, he asked curiously again, so? It's simple. If this is the priority, then the revival cross would only provide the ability to revive, not return. That's because it would cause a conflict in priority, understand? This way, the revival cross will end up a seemingly good item that doesn't actually have much use, a waste of points and rank rewards. As they spoke, everyone saw Xian withdrawing many machine parts from his dimensional bag. He then began to assemble them, and he had no choice but to stop walking when it got too big. Everyone looked curiously at him. Doraemon. What did you take out from your 4D pocket this time? The Hopter? The Shrink Ray? A small satellite. Oh. A small satellite. We can use the yellow turbines to bring it several tens of thousands of meters into the sky, then use the electrical jets installed on it to escape the Earth's gravity. It can remain in low Earth orbit, thus Xian's head was lowered as he explained. I know what a satellite is. What I'm asking is, for what purpose? Zheng looked dumbly at the triangular metallic object slowly forming on the ground. It was greatly different from regular satellites. If no one told you it was a satellite, you would definitely be under the impression it was just a creation of metal by an abstract artist. Information. We need large amounts of information. Xian lifted his head and gave Zheng a sidelong glance. He laughed coldly. The total number of other teams, their manpower. What faction are they from? Do they not have one? Their location, as well as ours. The laboratory's location. No team in this movie possesses too large an influence. In other words, even an extra bit of information could decisively influence the battlefield. What do you think? I know information is important. Zheng said heavily. He looked in astonishment at Xian. But don't be so ridiculous. I'm only calling you Doraemon as a joke. Who knew you would really end up making such weird items? Xian ignored him, fiddling with his small satellite. The object finally took shape after a long time. He then took out 3 pieces of yellow cloth from his dimensional bag. He tossed them into the air. By the time the cloth landed, it had turned into 3 smaller-sized yellow turbines. Then, launch the satellite. Xian, it's as you guessed. They launched a satellite. In a certain place in America where Team Devil was, a woman was looking towards Clone Xian with astonishment and adoration. She said, also, the location of the 7th Underground Laboratory has been confirmed. We used up over 3,700 causality points, 3 times what was expected. Do we continue the surveillance on Team China? No need. From now on, you just need to monitor them once every 3 days. It's Team Celestial that needs to be monitored for 1 to 2 hours a day. You can split it up into segments of 24 hours. My original is me as well. There won't be too much deviation in our thinking. He knows we hold a special advantage, so if my guess is right, he'll use an open and above-board scheme against us from the start, forcing us into a confrontation of kings and soldiers against soldiers step by step. Clone Xian was sitting not far from her. He was fiddling with something similar to Team China's Xian, a strange triangular satellite. The girl hesitated momentarily. She said softly to Clone Xian, we hold such a huge advantage though. Why do we need to have this sort of battle? Isn't this unfair to our team? Couldn't you advise team leader? Just as her words fell, the nearby Clone Zheng, whose eyes were shut, suddenly opened. He stared at the woman. Zhang Xiaoxiu. I care not if you have the God Seal board, or if you love Xian or not. I just wish to tell you one thing. Don't interfere and ruin my battle with him. The battle can involve the teams battling as well. Whichever one wins first can join our battle as long as you're strong enough. But before that, before I fight him, I don't wish to see anyone interfering. Or else, he'll definitely kill that person. Send the location of the 7th Underground Laboratory to me. I'll wait there for him. If he lacks the qualifications to even meet me, there's no meaning to start whatever king versus king, soldiers against soldiers battle. If he can overcome all obstacles, and come before me without much loss in combat power, this fair battle shall be my reward for him. At Team China's location, Xian and the rest were lifting up their heads and watching the satellite soaring higher and higher. After a long time, Zheng called out to everyone. Let's go. Nothing will happen just standing here. Let's continue moving forward. Everyone recovered and continued walking forward. Only Xian was frowning and considering something. He only slowly followed along when everyone had gone 100 meters. His brows remained furrowed, however. No one knew what problem it was that this man couldn't handle. If someone was besides him, they would have heard his mutterings towards himself. You need to lose in order to obtain for a causality type enhancement or weapon for omniscience. What needs to be lost? There's a 90% chance of it being luck.